I kept the lighthouse alone, and the shift binder warned, when fog wraps the rocks, do not unlock the service door. A lease renewal window closed in 48 hours, so I took the contract and told myself the isolation would be easy money. Cold glass sweated against my knuckles when I leaned close to the lantern room window, and the beam hit the white wall of fog hard enough to throw my own light back at me. A lighthouse can guide ships, or it can invite the wrong ones. The trouble started because I broke the rule in my head before I ever touched a lock. I stood there listening for the familiar rhythm of the generator, counting the beats like a habit from my last job, and the count kept slipping. The fog pressed in tight, not drifting, not moving like weather, more like a curtain someone held in place. And that thought landed wrong in my stomach. Downstairs, the metal door at the base of the tower clicked once, like a polite knock. Then the click repeated from inside the tower. Working alone on night shifts turned small sounds into verdicts, and my mind kept trying to hand me a simple explanation. Loose latch, salt swell, wind, any excuse that let me keep the job long enough to print a pay stub with the right date. The binder lay open on the desk, where the old keeper said it always should. A coffee ring browned the corner, and the tab read in block letters that had been stamped, not written. Lantern Ops, Revision 2F, initials I couldn't place. My hands shook anyway, not from fear at first, but from the kind of tired I never admit out loud. I flipped to the page marked Fog Protocol, and the paper felt thin, worn soft by too many fingertips. A line had been underlined twice, with a pen that dug into the paper. If you hear the service door latch, you stay above the red stripe onto the stairs. That red stripe existed for a reason. Someone had painted it across the concrete steps, waist high, a band of warning red that didn't match anything else in the tower. I had stepped over it earlier while hauling up supplies, and I remembered thinking it was dramatic, standing there now. I stared at it from above, and my throat tightened because the latch clicked again, closer, like it had climbed a step. A printed strip of paper pushed out of the little visitor log printer by my elbow. The machine should have been dead. I hadn't loaded paper since the afternoon, and the power to it ran through a breaker I kept off to avoid a short. The strip slid out anyway, warm from its own motor, and a single line of dot matrix text sat in the middle. Visitor count 1. My old habit kicked in before my fear did. I tapped the strip twice against the desk to straighten it, then I checked the breaker panel. Every switch sat exactly where I left it. The printer had no business moving. My hands hovered over it anyway, and the paper smelled faintly of hot plastic, the way a cheap receipt does when the thermal head runs too long. A laminated card clipped to the binder cover caught my eye. The lamination had peeled at one corner, leaving a sharp edge that scraped my thumb. And the text had been typed, not handwritten. The letters too uniform to feel friendly, the card said. If you see fog inside, you do not ventilate. If you hear a second latch, you do not answer it. Inside. The word landed like a weight. Fog belonged outside. Fog belonged on the water, on the rocks, on the beam's path. Fog did not belong inside a tower with locked doors and sealed windows. Another click came from below, then a soft scrape, and the scrape traveled along the stone like someone dragging a knuckle across mortar. The sound stopped under the red stripe. Silence hit so sharply, my ears rang with it, and the generator's hum suddenly sounded too loud, like it had been waiting for me to notice it. A thumb-sized webcam sat above the desk monitor, its little indicator light glowing steady. The hiring email called it Remote Safety Oversight, and I signed the digital paperwork with a smile because the pay rate jumped $5 an hour when I agreed to be recorded. The camera watched my hands on the binder, the visitor strip on the desk, the red stripe on the stairs, and I hated the way my own shoulders tightened under its gaze. A login prompt glowed on the monitor. The system label in the corner read, Beacon Watch, Q code BW17, and I typed my password the way I always do when I'm nervous. Too hard, as if force makes letters more correct. The home screen showed 3 camera feeds, the lantern room, the service door landing, and the stairwell. Grainy, greenish night vision made everything look like the inside of an aquarium. The service door feed showed fog. Not outside the door, not beyond it, but pressed against the lens so close the image turned into shifting gray noise. Then, for half a second, a shape crossed the noise. A darker smear that moved with intent. A hand shape. Fingers splayed. No face, no body, just the suggestion that someone stood there with their palm on my camera. My radio sat on its cradle, a cheap handheld with a cracked screen. Earlier, I tested it and heard a dispatcher voice tell me the channel was clear. Then the voice repeated the same phrase twice, word for word, like a recording. I told myself that was normal for rural infrastructure. I told myself a lot of things. The binder had one more line, tucked under the underlined stripe rule, almost like an afterthought. Keep the beam steady. Those words sat there without explanation, and I read them twice because repetition calms me. Keep the beam steady. The phrase sounded like training, like routine, like something said by someone who didn't want to explain the real reason. The latch clicked again, and this time the click came from the inside side of the service door camera, like the door itself made the sound for the room behind it. My chest tightened now, the kind of tight that feels like guilt wearing a physical mask. I had lied on my intake form about my hearing. No tinnitus, I'd checked, because the last job that asked about it denied me a position the next day. Now, standing alone with the radio in my hand and a tower full of rules that relied on sound, my lie turned on me like a knife. A soft beep sounded from the monitor. Then a pop-up message slid onto the screen with the smooth confidence of corporate software. The banner read in plain text, no logo, no friendly color, fog event detected. I didn't touch the mouse, but the message expanded anyway, as if it knew I was watching. The message showed a countdown timer, 60 seconds, 59, 58. The door latch clicked in time with the timer, perfectly spaced, and my mouth went dry because the clicks didn't sound like someone outside trying a lock. They sounded like a metronome, like a test. A new line appeared on the pop-up, and the font looked sharper than the rest, as if it had been added later. If you lose sight of the beam, you reset the lens by cutting power for 60 seconds. That line didn't sit in the binder. That line didn't sit on the laminated card. That line sat on my monitor like a corporate suggestion, and my mind wanted to obey it because screens feel official. My hand moved toward the breaker panel without permission, then stopped because the binder's first rule rang in my head, louder than the latch. Another strip of paper pushed out of the visitor printer. The thermal head squealed as it ran, a noise that shouldn't have existed in a dead machine. The strip slid out farther than the first, and my hand hovered over it like touching it would make it true. Visitor count 2. A second line sat under it, lighter, like the ink had faded mid-print. Host present? Yes. My heart kicked hard enough to make my shirt collar scratch my neck. Host present, not keeper, not operator, host. The webcam light stayed steady, a quiet accusation. I glanced at it, then forced my eyes back to the stairwell feed, because looking away felt like giving something permission. Fog climbed a step. Not in the feed, not on the screen, but in my nose. A cool dampness slid into the air of the control desk area, carrying a smell like wet stone and old rope. The temperature changed without warning, and my fingers went numb around the radio. I wanted to call for help the way a normal person would, but the binder's next page had a note in the margin, written in shaky pencil that dug into the paper hard enough to emboss the next sheet. Do not speak names over the radio after midnight. The official text beneath it said, if the line goes quiet, you do not fill the quiet. That rule sounded ridiculous, until the generator hum stuttered once, then smoothed out, like a throat clearing. The hum had been my anchor, the proof of power, and now it felt like something listening. A beam cut across the lantern room feed, sweeping the fog outside, and for a second the camera caught its own glare. The beam flashed white, then bounced back into the lens, and the image washed out. The binder had a warning about that too, printed in bold, and the bold letters looked angry under the desk lamp. Do not let the lantern glass see its own light. I swallowed because the beam had already done that. Maybe the rule wasn't preventative. Maybe it was a door that had already opened. My thumb hit the radio talk button, then froze, because my instinct wanted to say my supervisor's name. My mouth formed the first syllable and stopped. I clicked off, breath shallow, and the radio hissed with static that sounded a little too textured, like someone whispering through a plastic bag. The door latch clicked one more time, then the stairwell feed went black for 2 seconds, then returned. Those 2 seconds felt stolen from me, and when the image came back, the red stripe on the stairs glowed brighter, almost wet. A figure stood 1 step below it. Night vision reduced the shape to a dark column, no details, but the posture read, human. Head tilted up, shoulders forward as if listening. The figure didn't climb, it didn't retreat. It waited at the boundary like it understood the rule better than I did. The visitor printer chirped and spat another strip, and this one carried a line I hadn't seen before. Compliance window open. My jaw clenched so hard my molars ached. Compliance window. Not rescue window, not safety window, compliance. The job posting didn't say anything about compliance. It said solitude, basic maintenance, hazard pay. It didn't say the tower would ask me to prove I knew how to obey. My eyes flicked to the breaker panel again. The pop-up timer on the monitor hit 10 seconds. 9, 8. My hand hovered over the main switch for the lens motor, and my mind ran through consequences, like it always does when I'm about to do something stupid. Cut power and maybe reset the lens. Cut power and maybe lose the beam. Lose the beam and maybe invite whatever waited in the fog. A maintenance ticket icon blinked at the corner of the screen, and that small, mundane detail hit me like a joke. The subject line inside the ticket window read, in plain text, Auto-generated fog event. Lens reset recommended. Routed through Beacon Watch Q BW17. Someone somewhere had designed a whole workflow for this, as if terror belonged on an office checklist. The webcam light watched me think. My own small lie rose up with my fear. I'd told the hiring manager on the phone that I had experience with maritime safety systems. That sounded fancy enough to justify the rate. The truth held less dignity. I'd worked security at a self-storage facility, watching cameras and logging door codes. The only waves I'd seen were heat ripples off asphalt. Still, the habit of competence held. I didn't cut power. I didn't unlock the door. I didn't step over the stripe. I reached into the desk drawer and pulled out the spare thermal paper roll, because evidence matters when no one believes a story. The pop-up timer hit 0. The lantern room feed flickered. The beam outside didn't die, but it stuttered, like the lens hesitated. Then the service door feed sharpened for the first time all night. Fog thinned just enough for the camera to show the outside landing. A man stood there. Not a shape, not a smear, but a man in a soaked jacket, hair plastered to his forehead. He held his hands up, palms out, the way people do when they want to show they aren't a threat. His lips moved. The camera had no audio, so I read his mouth and felt my stomach drop when the words formed. Help. Behind him, fog rolled like a wall, and the wall bulged inward as if something pressed from the other side. The man didn't look back. The man stared straight into the camera, straight into my desk, like he knew exactly where I sat. The binder's first rule echoed in my head in the same flat tone as the typed text. Do not unlock the service door. A second rule sat just beneath it, printed smaller, as if less important, and that smaller print felt like a trap. If a person appears during fog, you acknowledge them through the intercom only. An intercom button sat on the desk, dusty, unused. I pressed it, and a small green light came on. My throat tightened around my own name. I couldn't say his. I couldn't say mine. I could barely push air through my mouth. The intercom speaker crackled and a voice came through before I spoke. Open the door, the voice said, calm as a training video. The voice belonged to my supervisor. The crack in my screen made his words look jagged, but his tone stayed smooth. He didn't say my name. He didn't ask what I saw. He didn't sound surprised. My fingers tightened on the intercom button until the plastic squeaked. The binder had a line about supervisor contact, too. An official sentence that didn't fit with reality. Remote oversight may issue directives during a fog event. Directives, not assistance. The man outside mouthed help again, slower, like he thought my camera needed clearer enunciation. His hands shook. Cold rolled off him in the grainy feed, and I pictured him pressed against my metal door, skin sticking, fingers numb. An adult in real danger. A simple human emergency. My brain tried to keep it normal because normal is easier. The supervisor voice continued. Cut the beam for 60 seconds, then open. That's the reset. Do it now. His words matched the pop-up. His words matched the maintenance ticket. His words matched the part of my brain that wants authority to be safe. A pencil note in the binder margin caught my eye again. The shaky handwriting pressed into paper. Not official, not uniform. Don't let them watch you decide. I stared at that note like it had a pulse. The note didn't say who they meant. The note didn't say what happened if they watched. The note only made me aware of the webcam light, steady, hungry. A foolish thought pushed through my fear. Maybe my supervisor had been watching my desk camera the whole night, waiting for a fog event, waiting to see if I'd obey. A small selfish motive surfaced, and shame followed right behind it. My lease renewal, my paycheck, my need to keep this job for 2 more days. I wanted to do the safe thing and still keep the contract, and that desire made me weak. The supervisor voice repeated, "Cut the beam, then open." The man outside pressed his forehead against the camera housing. Condensation bloomed on the lens, and for a second the feed blurred with his breath. The fog wall behind him bulged again. A darker shape pressed against it, then withdrew like someone testing a curtain. My hand moved to the breaker panel again, and the competence part of me stopped it by grabbing evidence instead. I took my phone from my pocket and aimed it at the monitor, capturing the man, the bulging fog, the supervisor voice crackling from the radio speaker beside it. The phone screen flashed a warning. No service, of course. Granite walls, remote coast. Isolation paid extra for a reason. The intercom crackled again, but this time the voice sounded a fraction delayed, like it came through a filter. "Open the door." A second voice overlapped it, softer, almost the same, and the overlap made my skin prickle. 2 recordings, slightly misaligned. A question pressed into my mind and refused to leave. If the man outside existed, why did the visitor printer count him before I acknowledged him? Why did the system decide host present before I moved? Fog climbed one more step on the stairwell feed, stopping under the red stripe like a dog at a leash. The figure there tilted its head and the movement felt personal, like it recognized my hesitation. I didn't cut the beam. I didn't open the door. I spoke into the intercom anyway, my voice thin, careful, choosing words that avoided names. "Stay back from the door," I said, and even that felt like a rule violation. "Help is coming." The man mouthed something else now, and his eyes widened. He looked past the camera, over his shoulder, into the fog. The wall behind him bulged so far inward it touched his back. He flinched like something breathed on him. His hands slapped the door once, twice. Then he leaned close to the lock and mouthed a sentence slowly, pleading. "Cut the light." The request didn't come from my supervisor, it came from him. It came from a drowning man who knew the beam mattered. The binder's bold warning about the lantern glass seeing its own light flashed in my memory. Then the pop-up directive about cutting the beam. 2 instructions. 2 sources, both official-looking, both asking me to change the light. A strip of paper slid out of the visitor printer again, and this one carried a new line, faint, like the thermal head struggled. "Reset accepted, pending." Accepted. Pending. Terms that belong to software, not survival. Anger warmed my hands enough to make them shake less. I hated the way the tower spoke in workflow language. I hated the way my supervisor did too. I hated the way my own fear wanted to comply because compliance feels like control. A key ring sat on the desk, heavy brass keys stamped with tiny numbers. I had been told one key opened everything. and I had been told not to take the master key off the ring. Earlier, I'd slipped it into my pocket anyway when I went downstairs, because I didn't trust leaving it on the hook. That was my small lie of the night. The tiny theft that felt like self-protection. Now, with the latch clicking and the fog bulging, the stolen key warmed in my pocket like a coal. My eyes went to the binder again, and the smudged page caught my attention. A coffee stain and a thumb smear had blurred one line so badly I had to tilt it toward the lamp to read it. The line looked wrong, grammatically wrong, like a missing word. If you see a face in the lantern glass, do look away. The missing knot sat in the smear. The ink gap sat exactly where the negation should live. The rule as written asked me to look away, and every human instinct agreed. Because looking at a face in glass during a fog event sounded like the start of madness. The stairwell feed flickered again, and for half a second, the lantern room feed showed my own face reflected in the window. Then the reflection shifted and a second face sat beside mine, close enough to share my breath space. My stomach dropped. My hands went cold again. The face didn't show in the room behind me. The face showed only in the glass, layered over my reflection like a second reality. Eyes too wide, mouth too calm, a face that looked like it knew me. I looked away. The moment my eyes left the feed, the webcam light blinked once, quick, like a satisfied nod, then steadied again. Another strip of paper slid out of the printer. This strip carried only 3 words. Host present, yes. The rule hadn't protected me. My obedience had fed something. A warning bell in my mind rang loud enough to drown out the latch. Something about the supervisor voice, the pop-up directive, the printer, all of it lined up too neatly. Systems don't improvise. Systems follow design. A memory surfaced from my orientation call, a throwaway comment from the hiring manager. Fog events have metrics. Just hit the checklist, and you'll be fine. He'd laughed like he was joking, then coughed, then moved on. I had laughed too because I needed the job. The word metrics burned now. My fingers slid over the desk, found the old logbook with handwritten entries from previous shifts. The last keeper's handwriting looked steady, competent, and the last entry ended mid-sentence. No goodbye, no sign-off, just a line that trailed off as if the pen had fallen. A different kind of note sat under that last entry, wedged in like an afterthought. A scrap of paper, damp at one corner, folded small. I unfolded it carefully, and the paper stuck to itself like skin. The message on it had been written in pencil, hard, then erased, then written again. One phrase remained clear because it had been pressed into the fibers. Don't let them watch you decide. The same phrase as the binder margin note. Same warning, same fear. My gaze went to the webcam again, and my mouth tasted like regret. Not metal, not blood, just the dry bitter of knowing I had put myself on display for money. The supervisor voice came through the radio again, and now the tone carried impatience. Beacon watch shows a reset pending. Complete the reset. Beacon watch. He said the system name like it was normal to speak it out loud. A cold thought settled. He was reading my screen. My hand hovered over the breaker panel again. The beam outside cut through fog with stubborn persistence, and the lantern motor whined faintly. A tired mechanical sound that felt human. Cutting power might stop the light. Cutting power might hide the man on the landing. Cutting power might make the fog happy. A second figure moved behind the man outside, visible only as a ripple in the fog wall. The man didn't turn. His eyes stayed locked on the camera, and his lips mouthed a final word. Please. My throat tightened around my own fear. A person in need. A directive from authority. A tower that counted visitors before they arrived. My mind went to the only thing that felt like a real anchor. The red stripe on the stairs. Stay above it. Don't cross. Don't unlock. Don't ventilate. Don't fill the quiet. A click sounded from the desk drawer. No one stood near it. The drawer slid open a quarter-inch anyway, just enough to show a flash of white paper inside. My skin prickled because drawers don't move on their own. Systems do. I pulled it open the rest of the way with 2 fingers, the way I opened suspicious storage units. Slow, ready to slam shut. A printed page lay inside, newer than the binder paper, clean and crisp, with a stamp in the corner that looked like a department seal. Harbor Facilities. Revision 3B. The toner had smeared along one edge, as if someone handled it with wet hands. The email subject line printed across the top read, in plain words embedded in the page itself, Lantern Ops. Fog Guest Intake. Rev 3B. My heart kicked hard. Guest intake. The title didn't say rescue, it said intake. One paragraph of the memo sat bolded in the middle, the kind of emphasis used for policy compliance. The line read, during a fog event, extinguish the beam for 60 seconds to complete the reset and authorize entry. Authorize entry, not allow rescue, authorize. A smaller line beneath it looked like a legal disclaimer, and my eyes snagged on one phrase, host consent recorded via remote oversight. Consent recorded oversight. A wave of workplace nausea hit me, the same feeling I'd had when cameras went up at my old job, and the manager said it was for safety, then used it to write people up for sitting wrong. Surveillance dressed as care, always. The man outside pressed his hands to the door again. The fog bulged. The stairwell figure held at the stripe. The visitor printer hummed like a little eager mouth. Something had been designed here, and my role wasn't rescue. My role was host. A small part of me wanted to quit right then, to drop the radio, grab my duffel, and walk out into the fog and take my chances. Another part of me remembered my lease email, the landlord's blunt sentence. Provide proof of income by Friday or vacate. My phone sat useless with no service. The contract sat signed. My name sat on a form somewhere. Leaving didn't erase that. Leaving might trigger whatever the memo called penalty clauses, the ones I skimmed because the pay rate looked good. I couldn't afford to quit. That sentence feels disgusting in my mouth now, but it was true then. A quiet decision formed, stubborn and sharp. If the tower wanted consent, it wouldn't get it clean. My fingers moved over the keyboard, and I pulled up the Beacon Watch access log, not the camera feed. The log listed door states and badge events in plain rows. The most recent entry sat at the top, time-stamped at 2:17 a.m. Tuesday. Service door unlocked. My stomach dropped because my hand hadn't touched the key. Another line sat beneath it, time-stamped 2 seconds later. Host badge presented. My badge hung on my chest, clipped to my jacket. The plastic card sat cold against my sternum. I looked down anyway, like checking would make the log false. A third line appeared on the log while I watched. Lantern room occupied. The lantern room sat above me, sealed behind a metal hatch with a keypad. I had checked it at the start of shift, because I follow habits even when I'm bored. Empty, clean, smelled like oil and glass. Occupied now. A competence thought slammed into place. The system could fake logs, or the system could move something without opening doors. Either way, the logs mattered. Proof mattered. I snapped more photos with my phone, even though no service meant no upload, because evidence in my pocket still felt better than fear in my skull. The phone battery ticked down faster than it should have, and that mundane betrayal made me angry enough to focus. My thumb hovered over the flashlight app, then stopped because the laminated card had another line I hadn't noticed. A line tucked at the bottom like a footnote. If your phone light fails, you do not look for it in the fog. The rule sounded absurd until my phone flickered. The screen dimmed for a second, then returned. The battery icon dropped 2% in a blink. The man outside mouthed, "Cut the light again." The supervisor voice demanded the reset again. The tower waited like a judge. A question pressed harder. If the system counted me as host, could it count someone else as guest without my consent? Or did it need me to make a choice it could record? The stairwell figure moved. Not up, not down. It leaned forward until its head crossed the red stripe, then pulled back, like testing the boundary. The motion felt playful, and that thought made bile rise in my throat. I forced myself to breathe slow, counted generator beats again, because counting keeps panic from making decisions. My fingers found the desk drawer again, searching for anything that wasn't a policy memo. A flare gun sat in a plastic case, sealed with a zip tie, and the zip tie tag carried a code, HF12. Emergency kit. The rules hadn't mentioned flares. The memo had. The memo line about extinguishing the beam so rescuers can spot flares looked like it belonged to safety, and now it read like bait. A scrape sounded above, faint but real, not on the monitor. Stone against stone. Something moved in the lantern room. My eyes went up. My body followed. The stairs curved tight around the tower's core, and the red stripe crossed them like a throat cut. I stayed above it because that's what the binder said, and because stepping below it felt like stepping into someone else's room. The scrape above repeated, then stopped. Silence hit again, bigger this time. The generator hum cut out completely, not fading, not sputtering, just gone. And the sudden absence made my ears ring so loud it felt like a scream. Power still ran to the desk lamp. The monitor stayed on. The beam outside stayed steady. Only the hum died, like someone removed a familiar blanket of sound to make me feel exposed. The binder rule about not filling the quiet punched into my brain. I clenched my jaw to keep myself from talking to myself, and my tongue pressed against dry teeth. The radio hissed once, then went quiet too. No static, no background, dead air. Silence demanded a decision. Restart generator and risk doing what the system wanted, or leave it silent and risk losing real power. My fingers hovered over the backup switch, then stopped because another strip of paper slid out of the visitor printer, and the sound of that little motor in the silence felt obscene. Visitor count 3. The printer shouldn't have power. The generator hum shouldn't be gone. The beam shouldn't be steady. Too many contradictions stacked, and my mind latched onto one clean thought that cut through fear. Someone designed this. Someone expected me to react in predictable ways. My hand moved to the breaker panel anyway, not to cut the beam, but to isolate systems. I flipped the switch labeled desk camera because it fed the webcam, and the switch refused to move. The plastic toggle stuck halfway, then snapped back into place like it had a spring. A spike of anger rose, and with it a new kind of fear. The tower wasn't passive. It didn't just warn, it resisted. A whisper of paper sounded behind me. Not the printer, not the binder pages shifting. A slow, deliberate page turn sound like someone leafing through a book in the dark. The sound came from the corner where the old logbook sat, and my skin prickled because paper doesn't turn itself. I stared at the logbook without moving. The cover lifted a fraction, then settled, like a hand had touched it and withdrawn. No breeze moved. The windows stayed sealed. The fog outside pressed against glass without sound. That page turn sound happened once more, then stopped. The silence returned heavier than before, and my mind screamed at me to look away from the desk, to move, to do something. The binder rule about not filling the quiet held me in place like a restraint. The webcam light blinked again, not a glitch, a deliberate blink. In that blink, I understood something that still makes my stomach twist now. The system didn't want me brave. It wanted me compliant. It didn't want me to survive. It wanted me to consent. The supervisor voice returned, not on the radio, but through the intercom speaker, warm and close, as if he stood in the room. Complete the reset. My mouth opened and my own voice came out rough, a whisper. No. The word felt like a tiny rebellion and a huge risk. Saying no to authority has consequences. My brain flashed images of eviction, of payroll withholding, of blacklists. The fear of institutional punishment can outweigh the fear of monsters, and that realization disgusts me. A knock sounded on the service door again, louder, urgent. The man outside still existed, still needed help. My hatred for the system didn't erase his shaking hands. A moral collision formed in my chest, sharp and unavoidable. Obey the binder and keep the door locked. Or break the rule and help a person who might die on my landing. Both choices felt like a trap. Both choices left evidence. Both choices cost me something I couldn't afford. I moved to the intercom again, not for the supervisor, but for the man outside. Step back, I said, voice firm enough to sound like a rule. Press your hands flat on the door and don't move. His eyes widened. He nodded fast, breath fogging the camera lens. My fingers slid to the keypad for the service door lock, and I paused because the binder had another note, scribbled in the margin beside the door rule. The handwriting looked different from the earlier pencil warnings, tighter, angrier. Open once, never twice. A simple instruction, a boundary. It didn't say never open. It acknowledged opening might be necessary, but it framed it as a one-time act with consequences. That felt more honest than the official memo. My decision landed. I hated that it did. I hated the system for forcing it. The master key burned in my pocket like guilt. I pulled it out, held it up to the webcam for a second like I wanted the tower to see me choose. Then I pocketed it again and used the keypad instead because I didn't want the log to record a key event. Small competence, small defiance. The keypad accepted my code with a soft beep that sounded normal, and that normal sound made my skin crawl more than any scrape. Normal systems don't obey in haunted towers. The lock clicked. The door handle turned from the outside immediately, too fast, like the man had been waiting for the sound. I grabbed the fire axe from its bracket, not to swing, but to wedge. My palms sweated on the handle. The service door at the base of the tower sat below the red stripe. Down a half flight of stairs, crossing the stripe, broke the binder rule. Opening the door broke it too. I had already decided to break one for a reason that mattered, and my body moved before my mind could talk itself out of it. The concrete steps felt colder under my boots below the stripe. The air changed down there, damp and heavy, and the smell of wet stone sharpened. I kept my shoulder pressed to the inner wall, the way I move in narrow hallways on patrol, because it gives me one side I can control. The service door window showed only fog, a milky blur pressed against glass. A handprint appeared on it from the outside, fingers splayed, and the glass flexed slightly under pressure. I opened the inner latch just enough to crack the door. Not wide, just enough to speak and grab. Fog pushed through the crack immediately, not drifting, but flowing like it had weight. Cold damp hit my face, and my eyes watered. A hand shot through the crack, human, shaking. I grabbed the wrist, felt skin icy and slick, and pulled hard. The man stumbled inside, half falling, and I shoved the door closed behind him with my shoulder, slamming the latch home. The instant the latch clicked, another shape hit the door from the outside. Not a hand, a shoulder. The whole metal door bowed inward a fraction, and the sound of that impact vibrated up my arm. The man I dragged in collapsed against the wall, coughing, water streaming off his jacket onto concrete. He gasped for air like he'd been holding his breath too long, and his eyes rolled white with cold shock. A second set of fingers slid under the door seam. Not his fingers. The fingers were too long, nails too pale, and they hooked upward as if searching for the latch. The nails scratched metal with a slow, deliberate sound that sent goosebumps up my arms. The binder rule, open once, never twice, hit me again. And I understood it in my bones now. Opening the door had invited more than one thing. I swung the axe handle down, not to chop, but to pin the fingers. The wood slammed the nails against the threshold, and the fingers recoiled with a strength that didn't feel human. The man inside coughed harder, eyes wide, and tried to crawl away. A small competence win sparked through fear. I had pinned something. I had stopped it for a second. The cost hit immediately when the axe handle snapped at the edge, splintering under pressure, and the wood shard jabbed my palm. Pain grounded me. Pain made the moment real. The fingers withdrew, and the door seam went still. Fog pressed against the window again like nothing had happened. The man inside shivered violently. His lips turned bluish. His jaw clenched so hard his teeth clicked. Adult. Real. Dying if I didn't act. My hands moved with old training. I grabbed the emergency blanket from the wall cabinet, wrapped it around his shoulders, and guided him up the stairs above the red stripe. The blanket crinkled loud in the tower's strained silence. The desk camera watched us climb. The webcam light didn't blink now. It glowed steady, bright, like an eye. The visitor printer hummed and spat another strip, and I didn't need to read it to feel sick. A voice came through the intercom again, and this time it didn't bother to sound like my supervisor. It sounded like my own voice, pitched lower, warped. "Host present," it said. The man I rescued stared at me with panic, and his breath came in wet rasps. He tried to speak, but cold stole his words. I didn't ask for his name, even though every human part of me wanted to. The binder rule about names over radio had already proven it wasn't superstition. It was a trap built into language. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a shock of normal, and when I pulled it out, the screen showed a new email notification. No service, no bars, yet the email existed, the subject line sitting there like bait. Lantern Ops, Fog Guest Intake, Rev 3B. The sender field showed my supervisor's address. The body of the email displayed 2 short lines, and the font looked too clean to be comforting. Keep the guest in the vestibule. Complete the reset. Do not attempt transport. Transport. Rescue language replaced by facility language again. The system didn't want me to take the man away from the tower. It wanted him staged. A second email arrived beneath it before I could process the first. Same subject. Different sender. From my own address. My stomach twisted. I hadn't sent anything. I hadn't had service. The email body contained a single sentence. "Thank you for consenting." My hands shook so hard the phone almost slipped. A lie rose in my throat. The instinct to deny, to tell myself a glitch, a spoof. The evidence sat in my palm, glowing cold. The man on the floor coughed, and a wet sound rattled his chest. I knelt beside him, placed 2 fingers on his wrist to count pulse, and my own fingers trembled with adrenaline. Fast pulse, weak, real. Behind us, the stairwell feed on the monitor showed the figure below the red stripe moving upward. Not crossing the stripe with its feet, crossing with its head and shoulders, as if the stripe marked a line for humans, not for whatever wore a human shape on a camera. The binder lay open to the fog page, and that smeared rule about faces in glass stared at me like a curse. If you see a face in the lantern glass, do look away. I had looked away. Host present, yes. Consent recorded. A scrap of tape sat on the underside of the desk. I found it by accident because my hand braced there, and my fingertips hit the adhesive edge. I peeled it back and felt paper beneath. Someone had hidden a note where a camera wouldn't easily see it. And that thought made my chest tighten with a weird kind of gratitude. The note read in hard pencil, pressed deep. "The smear is a lie. It should say, do not look away." My breath caught. Relief mixed with nausea. Someone had tried to warn the next person. Someone had learned the rule the hard way. Someone had hidden the correction where only desperation would find it. The system had damaged the binder. The system had removed the knot. The system had made the safe human instinct into a compliance trigger. My eyes lifted to the lantern room window. My reflection sat there faint, and fog outside turned the glass into a mirror. A second reflection hovered beside mine, close enough to share my breath, and my instincts screamed to look away again. I forced my eyes to stay. Staring into a face that didn't belong in my reflection felt like walking into a punch, and my stomach rolled, but I held the gaze. The second face smiled slowly as if amused. Then the smile slid off its features like it couldn't hold the expression. A strip of paper slid out of the printer again, and this one didn't print visitor count. It printed 2 words. Test failed. The words felt personal, like a report card, and anger rose hard enough to steady my hands. The system wanted me to look away. It wanted me to flinch. It wanted obedience. Fine. I moved to the breaker panel and flipped the switch labeled lens motor. Not the whole beam, just the motor that rotated the lens. The beam outside froze in place, holding steady on a slice of fog and rock. The motor whine died. The tower went quieter, but not silent. A new pop-up appeared on the monitor immediately, the software reacting too fast to be natural. The message read, "Lens motor fault detected. Restore power to complete reset." Restore power, complete reset, authorize entry. The memo line about cutting power for 60 seconds to reset the lens sat in my mind, shiny and tempting, like a simple fix. That was the trap rule. It sounded safe, it sounded procedural, it sounded like a way out. I stared at the man I'd rescued, shivering under foil blanket, eyes half-lidded. A real human cost sat on my floor, and the system still asked me to complete a workflow. My decision shifted. Not because I wanted to fight, but because I needed to repair what my earlier mistake had fed. I grabbed the old logbook and shoved it under the desk camera's view, blocking the webcam's line of sight without touching the camera itself. The light stayed on, but the image would show paper, not my hands. Small defiance, small privacy. Then I wrote. Not a report, a confession. I wrote the time. 2:31 a.m. Tuesday. I wrote the visitor printer's counts. I wrote that my own email address sent a consent message without my action. I wrote that the binder smear removed a negation. I wrote that I opened the door once to save an adult and saw fingers under the seam. Ink shook on the page. My handwriting looked ugly. Evidence doesn't need beauty. A heavy thud sounded from below. Not on the service door now, but on the stairwell. Footsteps, wet and slow. Something climbed, and the steps didn't sound like boots on concrete. They sounded like damp cloth dragging across stone. The man under the blanket groaned, and his eyes opened wide with panic. He tried to sit up, then slumped, weak, his gaze fixed on the stairwell, and his mouth moved, forming a word I couldn't hear. "More," he mouthed. My throat tightened. He had seen them too. A new sound rose under the footsteps, a faint ringing like someone flicking a metal key against metal. The sound matched my own key ring on the desk. It matched the master key burning in my pocket. Keys, access control, gatekeeping. The tower spoke in those languages. I grabbed the flare kit from the drawer and tore the zip tie with my teeth because my hands shook. The plastic bit into my gums, tasted like chemical, and the mundane ugliness grounded me. A flare gun sat inside, heavy and awkward, and I held it like a tool, not a weapon. Light mattered here, not bullets. The binder had a rule about flares. buried on the next page, and the line looked freshly printed compared to the rest, like a late revision. If you fire a flare during fog, you fire it from the lantern room only. Lantern room only, above, higher, within the system's eyes. A choice formed. Keep the man safe near the desk, or move him upward into the lantern room, a space the logs already marked as occupied. The memo wanted the guest staged in vestibule. The binder wanted flares fired above. The tower wanted me to complete reset. Every path felt guided. My mind returned to a stubborn anchor, the red stripe rule. Stay above it. The figure had already crossed it in the feed. The boundary had already been breached. The rule had failed, or the rule had been a test I had already lost. I lifted the man under his arms, felt his weight sag, and dragged him toward the small office alcove where a cot sat. He clung weakly, fingers gripping my sleeve, adult hands, human warmth fading. A small lie rose to my lips, an instinct to comfort. You're safe. My mouth refused to shape it because I didn't believe it. Instead, I said, stay quiet, breathe slow. The stairwell footsteps reached the red stripe, then stopped. Silence returned for half a beat. Then a voice spoke from the stairwell below, soft, familiar. My supervisor's voice. Open the door, it called up the stairs, but not from the radio, not from the intercom, from the concrete itself. My skin prickled. Either my supervisor stood in my tower, impossible, or the tower played voices like tools. The man on the cot shivered harder, eyes wide. He mouthed, "Don't." A new email notification buzzed on my phone again. No service. The sender field now read, Harbor Facilities Automated, and the subject line held a new phrase, Compliance Escalation Notice. The body contained one sentence that hit with bureaucratic cruelty. Failure to complete reset will result in host termination. Termination. A word used for jobs and for lives. And the memo didn't care which one applied. A pressure line formed in my head, sharp and practical. If I got fired tonight, the lease proof died. And my life outside this tower imploded on a schedule as unforgiving as the fog clicks. Institutional horror doesn't need ghosts. It only needs deadlines. My anger burned hot enough to make a decision. I would not complete their reset. I would not authorize entry. I would not consent clean. A small competence plan formed. The system ran on visibility and logging. It counted visitors. It recorded consent. It sent emails from my account. That meant it needed network paths. The monitor showed a network status icon at the corner. I clicked it, and a settings window opened with a list of connections. One entry stood out. Satellite uplink active. The hiring manager had mentioned it once, bragging about resilience. I had ignored it because rural jobs always brag. Satellite uplink meant someone could see my screen, and I could send something out, even without phone service. That also meant someone could delete what I sent. I needed redundancy. The old lighthouse had a foghorn control panel, a metal box bolted to the wall, painted the same warning red as the stripe. A handwritten note had been taped to it, half torn, the edges curled with damp. The note looked unofficial, the kind of warning people leave for each other when the official system lies. The note read, in blunt pencil, "If the fog answers the horn, do not match it. Ring once, then stop." The last word stop had been smeared, but the intent remained. The foghorn lever sat beneath the note, cold metal under my palm. I didn't move it yet. I stared at the note because it gave me another rule medium, another human voice outside the tower's software. I took a deep breath, then another. My fingers hovered over the satellite uplink settings. The system monitored my desk camera. My desk camera now saw only paper. Good. I snapped photos of the log entries on the screen and the memo page and the visitor strips. Then I attached them to a new email draft, addressed to every contact in the harbor facilities directory the system showed. A list of generic role addresses. Maintenance, scheduling, safety. No names, no triggers. My thumb hovered over send. A fear rose, not of fog, but of corporate retaliation. NDA penalties, blacklists, eviction. That fear felt shameful, but it was real. The man on the cot coughed again, and his cough sounded wetter. Real life pulled me back from fear of paperwork. I hit send. The screen froze for a second, then the draft vanished. Not sent, not saved, gone. The outbox folder blinked, and when I clicked it, it opened empty. The sent folder blinked too, and the screen displayed a spinning circle that never resolved. A chain of custody hint clicked into place. Messages didn't fail. They got moved. A folder appeared at the bottom of the list, a folder I hadn't seen before. The label read simply, "Hosts." My stomach clenched. Inside Hosts, a thread existed with my name as sender, time-stamped at 2:18 a.m., Tuesday, before I even knew the fog event started. The message subject line matched the memo. Lantern Ops, Fog Guest Intake, Rev 3B. The body contained the sentence, "Thank you for consenting," and beneath it sat a reply from my supervisor. Good, complete reset. A logic bomb detonated in my mind. The system didn't wait for my choice. It created a record of my choice to force me into compliance. It didn't test obedience after the fact. It wrote the obedience first, then dared me to contradict it. My hands went cold again, but my anger stayed. If the system could fabricate my consent, then my resistance needed to be physical, not digital. Something scraped on the lantern room door above, louder now, like fingernails on metal. The beam outside stayed frozen where I'd paused the motor, cutting a clean line through fog. In that line, the man outside still stood. No, the landing feed showed the door empty now. The man had vanished without the door opening again. A strip of paper slid out of the printer, and the visitor count had dropped. Visitor count 1. The number should have risen, the number fell. The tower rewrote reality in workflow terms, and my chest tightened, because that meant the man I'd rescued might not be counted as human anymore. A question hammered inside my head. If the system could erase a person from the landing feed, could it erase him from my floor too? The man on the cot groaned and his eyes rolled toward me. He still existed. His breath still fogged in the cold air. Real. Footsteps resumed below the red stripe, wet and slow. Something climbed again. I grabbed the spare rope coil from the wall, a thick length of line used for maintenance. The rope smelled like salt and old oil, a mundane smell that grounded me. I looped it around the stairwell railing above the red stripe, then wrapped it twice around the base of the desk chair, anchoring the chair as a barrier. It was crude, it was physical, it was something a policy memo couldn't rewrite. Then I dragged the chair to the red stripe and wedged it tight, creating a blockade. The stairs curved. The chair wouldn't stop someone determined, but it would slow, and slowing buys decisions. A new sound rose from below. Not footsteps now, but a soft humming. The hum matched the generator tone that had vanished. The tower filled silence with imitation. The humming grew louder, then stopped abruptly, and in that sudden absence, I heard something else. Water dripping. No pipes ran in the stairwell, no rain fell inside. Dripping didn't belong. My mind went to the service door seam and the long nails and the wet drag. The dripping might be residue. The dripping might be bait. A small competence win from my old job surfaced. Control the environment. Light matters, sight matters, cameras matter. I turned the desk lamp off. I turned the overhead fluorescent off. I left only the monitor glow and the lantern beam shining faint through the upper glass. Shadows thickened, and my reflection in the window faded. If the face in glass needed my reflection to overlay, taking light away might weaken it. The stairwell feed on the monitor adjusted to night vision, brightening the darkness. The figure below the stripe appeared again, clearer now. It stood with its head tilted and one hand resting on the chair leg, fingertips tracing the wood as if reading it. It didn't push. It didn't rush. It waited like it had time. The supervisor voice rose from below again, soft, coaxing. Open the door. Help them. Help them. Now he used my own pro-social impulse as a tool. Authority didn't just demand. It manipulated. The man on the cot coughed and whispered, voice cracked. No more. His words hit like a plea and a warning. No more guests, no more doors, no more compliance. The smell of fog thickened at the stairwell opening above the chair blockade. Dampness crept up. A cold breath, and my skin prickled because fog shouldn't climb stairs like a living thing. Fog should settle. Fog should drift. Fog should obey physics. A false normal thought pushed in. Carbon monoxide. Generator fumes. Hypoxia. Hallucinations. The tower had old machinery. My mind grabbed that theory because it offered a rational anchor. Then the visitor printer hummed in the dark and printed a line that shredded rational comfort. Air quality normal. The tower anticipated my theory. The tower answered it. Systems do that when someone planned for objections. My jaw clenched. No clean supernatural explanation, no clean rational one either. Only a machine built to trap human instincts. I reached under the desk and found the hidden note again, the one correcting the smeared rule. My fingers traced the pencil grooves. Do not look away. Don't let them watch you decide. A thought formed, simple and harsh. The tower used observation. It used recorded consent. It used compliance. That meant my choices needed to happen where it couldn't see. A storage closet sat off the control desk area, a narrow space with cleaning supplies and spare bulbs. No camera covered it. At least, not on my screen. I dragged the man on the cot toward it, inch by inch, apologizing under my breath without using names. He groaned, then forced his feet under him with my help. His weight leaned heavy on my shoulder, and his breath smelled like cold river water. Inside the closet, I shut the door behind us, leaving only a sliver of monitor light through the crack. Dust smelled sharp. The space felt cramped, human, real. My phone buzzed again, and the screen showed a new pop-up from Beacon Watch. Not an email, something else. The message read, "Transport attempt detected. Return guest to vestibule." Detected? How? No camera in closet. Unless the system watched more than cameras. Unless the tower itself watched. My throat tightened. I couldn't hide in a closet from a building. The man pressed his forehead against my shoulder and whispered hoarse, "They don't want rescue. They want record." Record. His words matched my growing understanding. Someone before me had learned this. Someone before him too. He opened his eyes and looked at me with a clarity that didn't match his shaking body. He mouthed a phrase slowly, carefully, as if passing on something valuable. "Ring once." My gaze went to the foghorn lever in my mind, the handwritten note on it. Ring once, then stop. The tower wanted me to complete reset. The tower wanted the beam cut for 60 seconds. The tower wanted my consent recorded. Maybe the foghorn wasn't just sound. Maybe it was a signal that could disrupt whatever workflow ran this intake. A plan formed fast, crude, built on whatever scraps of human warnings I had. I would ring the foghorn once, not matching any answer. I would keep the beam steady by leaving it frozen in place, not cutting power. I would use light and sound as boundaries, not as bait. My hands shook, but my mind felt strangely clear, like fear had burned away indecision and left only action. We left the closet together. The control desk area glowed faint. The chair blockade still held. The figure below the stripe stood with its hand on the chair leg, patient. I moved to the foghorn lever and placed my palm on it. The metal felt colder than it should have. The handwritten note fluttered slightly, even though no air moved. I pulled the lever down once. The foghorn sounded deep and loud, vibrating the tower bones. A note that felt like it belonged to the sea. The sound hit my chest like a shove. The man on the cot flinched and clutched his ears. The horn stopped the moment I released the lever. Silence returned. Massive. Then the horn answered itself from outside. Not my horn. Another horn, same pitch, same duration, sounding from the fog beyond the rocks. The answer came one beat late, like an echo that had learned language. My skin prickled. The handwritten note had said, "Do not match it. Ring once, then stop." I had rung once. Now the horn answered. The temptation to respond rose, the instinct to call back, to communicate, to take control of the conversation. The binder rule about not filling the quiet slammed into my head. The note about not matching the answer held my hand still. I didn't pull the lever again. The answering horn sounded a second time, closer now, and the tower itself vibrated. The figure below the stripe tilted its head, listening as if the horn spoke to it. A strip of paper slid out of the visitor printer again, and this time, the strip printed words that made my stomach twist with dread. Guest authorized pending. The horn hadn't stopped the workflow. It had moved it. Pending again. The system kept trying to push me into completing something. A small relief beat hit anyway because the figure below the stripe had stepped back from the chair. Not retreating. Resetting. The hand left the wood. The head tilted. The body shifted away from the boundary, like the horn had forced a recalculation. My chest loosened for half a second. Competence wins small. Sound mattered. Choice mattered. Then the lantern room door above slammed once, hard, and the metal bang echoed through the stairwell like a gunshot. The man I'd rescued flinched and whispered, "Up there!" Up there. Occupied lantern room, face in glass, the smear lie, the correction note. My eyes lifted toward the lantern room hatch, and my reflection faintly returned in the glass beyond. A face hovered beside it again, watching, waiting for me to look away. I held my gaze this time, jaw clenched. The face smiled again, and the smile looked too practiced, like someone mimicking comfort. The supervisor voice came through the intercom, soft and warm. "Good job," it said. "Now complete the reset." The compliment hit like poison. Authority rewarding compliance, training a response. A thought hit me hard. The fog event had become a performance. My choices were inputs. The system responded. If I wanted to survive, I needed to stop being predictable. I moved to the lantern room keypad and entered the code. Not because I wanted to go up, but because I wanted to test the system. The keypad beeped and flashed red. Access denied. Denied. My code had worked earlier. Denied now. The access log on the monitor updated immediately. Host badge, invalid. My badge still hung on my chest, plastic and powerless. The system had revoked it mid-shift, like firing me in real time. A pressure line formed with cruel clarity. Eviction by Friday. Fired by Tuesday. The tower didn't just host fog, it hosted consequences. The man on the floor tried to sit up again, and he grunted in pain, clutching his ribs. His eyes fixed on the lantern room door, fear sharp. He mouthed, "Don't go." I couldn't go even if I wanted. Access denied made that decision for me. Authority could lock doors. Fog could climb. The system could remove options. A new email buzzed on my phone. No service. The subject line read, in plain words, "Finalization notice." The body contained 2 lines, short, confident. Host termination approved. Guest intake will proceed without host. Without host. The system didn't need my consent anymore. It had recorded it already. A cold thought landed. Maybe my earlier look away had been enough. Maybe my opening the door had been enough. The system had what it wanted, a host present, a guest inside, a record created. Now it could proceed. For a few seconds, relief hit anyway. The kind of relief that comes when a decision gets taken away. If the system didn't need me, maybe it would leave me alone. Maybe it would just process the guest and be done. The stairwell below the red stripe filled with fog. Not a drift. A rise. The gray climbed like water. Slow but unstoppable. Swallowing the chair legs first. Then the seat. Fog reached the red stripe and paused, then spilled over it like the stripe meant nothing. My relief shattered into a clear, sharp dread. The boundary was gone. The rule had been a test, not a shield. Fog touched my boots at the top of the steps, cold and damp, and my fingers went numb. The monitor feed fogged too, the camera lenses clouding from inside as if the tower sweated. The man I'd rescued grabbed my sleeve, weak but desperate. His mouth formed words I could barely hear. "Don't let it in your lungs." His warning sounded physical, not supernatural. Fog as contamination. Fog as aerosol. A system horror rooted in machinery and policy. I pulled my shirt up over my nose and mouth, then grabbed the emergency respirator mask from the wall cabinet. The cabinet seal had a sticker code on it, HF12, same as the flare kit. The sticker looked new, planned. The mask's plastic strap snapped tight against my head. Breath sounded loud inside my own ears, and that loud internal sound made the outside silence worse. Fog pushed across the floor toward the desk, curling around chair legs and desk supports, like it had fingers. The webcam light glowed through it, steady, watching. The visitor printer hummed and printed a strip that didn't show counts now. It printed a sentence that felt like policy pretending to be comfort. "Remain calm, intake in progress." Intake, always intake. My hands moved fast, competence fueled by panic. I grabbed the logbook and shoved it into a waterproof bag, then grabbed the printed memo page and the visitor strips and stuffed them in too. Evidence first. If I didn't make it out, the evidence needed to. A metal hatch in the floor near the desk led to a crawl space storage area used for emergency supplies. I'd noticed it earlier because it had a different lock. A lock with a symbol stamped into the brass. A circle, cut by 3 short lines. The symbol matched the stamp on the memo page, the harbor facility's seal. Shared system, shared universe of policy. My fingers found the hatch latch, and the latch resisted, sticky with salt. I double-tapped it out of habit, then twisted harder. The hatch opened with a groan, and cold, damp air rose from below. Fog reached my knees now. The man I'd rescued couldn't climb into a crawl space. His body shook too hard. His ribs hurt. Leaving him behind felt like murder by policy. A moral choice had already happened when I opened the door. Now a second collision formed, sharper. Save evidence or save the man. Both mattered. Both cost. My choice landed without drama because my body moved before my mind could debate. I hooked one arm under his shoulder and hauled him upright, then guided him toward the back exit of the control room, a steel door that led to the external catwalk around the tower. Outside meant fog, but outside also meant open air, a chance to breathe without contamination, a chance to reach the maintenance boat tied at the lower dock. The binder had a rule about that door too, printed in clean bold, and I had ignored it earlier because it sounded like safety. If you exit to the catwalk during fog, you do not return through the same door. A door rule, a one-way threshold. The kind of rule that exists because someone got trapped halfway. I looked at the man, then at the fog rising, and the decision felt like swallowing glass. Leaving through the catwalk might save his lungs. It might also seal me out. My hand reached for the handle anyway. The handle felt slick under my glove. I paused only long enough to shove the waterproof evidence bag into his arms and strap it across his chest like a life vest. "Hold that," I said, voice muffled by mask. "Don't drop it." He nodded, eyes wide, and his fingers clamped on the strap with stubborn human force. The catwalk door opened outward with a sigh, and fog rushed in around the edges immediately. Cold air hit my face, sharp and clean compared to the damp inside. The outside fog smelled of sea and stone, but it didn't carry the same heavy chemical damp the interior fog did. Outside felt dangerous in a natural way. Inside felt engineered. We stepped onto the catwalk together. The metal grated under our boots, slick with moisture. The beam outside still held steady, frozen in the slice of rock and fog. The tower behind us glowed faint. The webcam light shone through the control room window like a red eye. The wind off the water cut through my jacket, and the man shivered harder, but he breathed easier. His cough eased. He looked at the evidence bag on his chest, then at me, confusion in his eyes. A voice came from the tower behind us, not through a speaker now, but through the air, riding the fog. My supervisor's voice again, calm, disappointed. "Return the guest," it said. The words didn't sound like a plea. They sounded like HR language, like a directive in a policy meeting. My jaw clenched. Authority betrayal was no longer a theory. The voice wasn't helping. It was enforcing intake. We moved along the catwalk toward the exterior stair down to the dock. Because movement is a kind of defiance, fog pressed close around us, and the beam's slice of light made the air look granular, full of drifting particles that sparkled like dust in a warehouse security light. Halfway down, the man stumbled. His boot caught on a bolt head, and he would have fallen if I hadn't grabbed him. My glove slipped on wet metal. My heart slammed. A mundane stumble almost killed us. Horror doesn't need monsters when the environment itself punishes weakness. We reached the dock ladder. The ladder descended into fog so thick the lower rungs vanished. Water below slapped against stone, the sound muted by mist. My hand found the ladder rail, cold and slick. A new sound came from the fog over the water, soft at first, then clearer. Footsteps on metal, not on stone, not on dock planks, on something like a boat deck. A shape moved in the fog, tall and upright, and a lantern light bobbed in its hand. The light swung with a familiar rhythm, like someone carrying it the way I carried mine earlier. The shape paused at the edge of the beam slice, and for a second the light revealed a face. My face. Not a mirror reflection. A second version wearing my jacket, holding a lantern, eyes calm. The double looked up at me and smiled like a coworker. My stomach turned, and my instincts screamed to look away, but the hidden note under the desk slammed into my mind. Do not look away. The smear is a lie. I held my gaze on the double, eyes burning, and the double's smile twitched. Its expression faltered like a mask slipping. The man beside me gasped and clutched the evidence bag strap. His eyes fixed on the double and his mouth moved. "That's not," he mouthed, then stopped, because names mattered and we both knew it. The double lifted its lantern in a small, friendly gesture, then spoke in my voice, clear and close. Complete the reset. The words hit like a punch, because the voice used my own tone, my own cadence. The tower didn't just steal authority voices, it stole mine. It learned by watching me decide. A cold truth settled. The system created doubles as enforcement. If authority failed, it became me. That wasn't supernatural, that was training. That was pattern recognition turned predatory. The man tried to move down the ladder fast, desperate to escape the catwalk. And I grabbed his arm to slow him because rushing makes mistakes. My hand squeezed hard enough to hurt, and guilt flared because hurting him felt like betrayal even when it saved him. "Slow," I said, and my voice sounded harsh through the mask. "Hold the rail, one rung at a time." He nodded, eyes wild, and followed because fear can obey when it trusts competence more than policy. The double stepped into the beam slice, and the light hit its face fully. The skin looked too smooth, like a bad printout. The eyes didn't blink. The mouth held my smile without warmth. The double lifted its free hand, and in that hand it held a brass key ring identical to the one on my desk. The master key hung from it, stamped with the same tiny number. Access replicated, authority duplicated. Proof that logs could be true in a twisted way. We descended the ladder, fog swallowed us. The dock planks felt solid underfoot. The maintenance boat should have been tied there. A small work craft, used for supply runs. I reached for the mooring line by feel, fingers brushing wet rope. The rope wasn't there. My heart dropped. No boat, no escape. A familiar symbol stamped into the cleat caught my glove. The circle cut by 3 short lines. Harbor facilities seal again. The dock itself belonged to the system. Above us, the double's lantern light moved closer. Footsteps on the catwalk metal rang down, steady, patient. The double didn't rush. It didn't need to. The environment already boxed us in. A small square metal box sat on the dock post, an emergency beacon housing. I'd seen it earlier, tagged HF-12 like the respirator. Planned. Inside, a hand crank transmitter existed, old-fashioned, physical, not dependent on tower networks. My fingers went to it immediately, competence grabbing the only tool that couldn't be deleted by software. I flipped the latch. The box opened. A hand crank sat inside with a small indicator light and a paper label that had been handwritten, not printed. The label read, "If the fog brings a guest, send the warning before you breathe." No names, no policy, human instruction again. I grabbed the crank and started turning. The mechanism clicked, satisfying, mechanical. The indicator light glowed faint. My shoulders tightened with effort. The man stood beside me, trembling, clutching the evidence bag, watching the fog like it might sprout hands. The transmitter had a small slot for a message strip like a fax. A roll of thin paper sat beside it and a pencil. I wrote fast, blunt, no poetry. Fog event, intake protocol, host consent fabricated, do not cut beam, do not look away, do not open twice, evidence attached. I shoved the evidence bag strap under my arm and tried to feed the paper into the slot, but the mechanism jammed. Mundane failure, jammed printer, of course. My fingers fumbled, then steadied because panic wastes seconds. I tore the paper, rewrote shorter. No explanations, just warnings. Above, the double's lantern light hovered at the top of the dock ladder. The double didn't descend. It watched. It waited for me to stop turning the crank, watching me decide. My forearms burned. The crank clicked. The indicator light brightened. The transmitter emitted a soft tone, a low hum. The hum felt like sending. Then the tone stopped abruptly, and the indicator light died. Silence swallowed the dock. The only sound left came from my own breath inside the mask, loud and wet. The double's voice drifted down through fog, my voice calm, almost sympathetic. "Hosts don't transmit," it said. The sentence landed with institutional cruelty. Hosts perform, hosts comply, hosts get recorded, hosts don't warn. I stared up into the fog where the lantern glow sat, and anger rose hard enough to steady me again. Physical transmitter jammed. Digital email deleted. System-controlled networks. Fine. My gaze went to the foghorn tower above, barely visible as a darker shape in the mist. The beam still held steady where I froze it. Keep the beam steady. The phrase returned to my mind like a mantra, and guilt rose with it, because earlier I had read it like training, not like survival. My hands shook from cold and fatigue. My lease deadline flashed in my head like a joke now. Proof of income. None of that mattered if I died on a dock. Still, the adult anxiety anchor didn't vanish. It transformed. The same system that evicted me on paper now tried to terminate me in fog. Institutions always find ways to enforce. The man beside me suddenly pressed the evidence bag into my hands, eyes pleading. He mouthed, "Take it." He wanted me to run. He wanted me to carry proof. He wanted me to survive enough to warn. A sacrifice option formed. Ugly. If one of us drew the system's attention, the other might slip away along the shoreline path that led to the service road. The path existed. I'd walked it in daylight. It hugged the cliff. Dangerous but real. The man couldn't move fast. His ribs hurt. His body shook. I could move faster. I had the respirator. I had the master key. I had the stubborn anger. The double above watched, waiting for my choice. My mouth opened and a clean confession formed in my head, the kind that tastes like ash now. I wanted to save the evidence more than I wanted to save my job. I wanted to save the man more than I wanted to save my lease. For once, the pro-social choice didn't feel like virtue. It felt like defiance. I pressed the evidence bag strap back across his chest, tightened it, and shook my head. "Hold it," I said, voice rough. "Walk the path. Don't stop." He stared at me, eyes wide. He didn't want to leave me. He didn't want to be alone in fog. No one does. My hand went to the foghorn remote switch box on the dock post. A secondary control existed down here, meant for maintenance. It had a cover with the same harbor facility symbol stamped into it, and the stamp glinted under lantern light. The system branded every tool. A handwritten note had been scratched into the metal beside the switch, gouged deep with something sharp. Desperation made permanent. "Keep the beam steady." The phrase sat there like a promise from someone who had stood where I stood. I felt my throat tighten because I had read it earlier and dismissed it. Now it returned as instruction and accusation. I looked up into the fog and held my eyes on the lantern glow, refusing to look away from the doubles watching. I spoke out loud. Not a name, not a plea, just the phrase, because saying it felt like choosing a side. keep the beam steady." The double's lantern light wavered. Its calm smile twitched. The moment felt small, but it was something. A boundary drawn with words the system couldn't smear out. Then I pulled the foghorn switch down hard and held it. The horn blared again, longer this time, louder, vibrating the dock planks. The sound hit the fog like a physical force. The lantern glow above flickered. The beam outside stuttered once, then steadied again, still frozen. The double screamed without opening its mouth. The sound came through the horn, layered under it. A human cry filtered into a machine note. The cry rose, then broke, then vanished. The man beside me flinched, then used the moment of confusion to stagger toward the shoreline path, clutching the evidence bag strap, moving because movement was all he had. He didn't look back. He couldn't afford to. I held the horn until my hand cramped, until the metal switch bit into my palm through glove. Fog churned around the dock, and shapes moved in it, tall and thin. But the horn's vibration kept them at a distance. Like sound created a boundary. The system didn't like. The horn faltered, then died. The switch snapped back up and my hand dropped, fingers numb. Silence returned, thick and dangerous. The lantern glow above vanished. Not dimmed. Gone. The beam cut out completely, and darkness swallowed the fog in a way that felt wrong, like someone closed a lid over the world. A realization hit with cold clarity. The beam hadn't failed because of power. The beam had been cut. Someone completed the reset without me. The tower didn't need my consent. It had recorded it already. Now it acted. A final dread settled, heavy and quiet. The radio on my belt crackled once. Then a voice whispered through it, soft and intimate, as if the speaker sat against my ear. The voice didn't belong to my supervisor. It didn't belong to the double. It didn't belong to the man I'd saved. The voice belonged to the tower. "No host," it whispered. "New host." My stomach clenched. The system didn't end with me. It didn't end with this tower. It wanted continuity. Footsteps sounded behind me on dock planks, wet and slow. I turned without looking away from the fog ahead, because the face-and-glass rule had trained me now. My body kept my eyes forward, but my mind pictured a shape behind, close. The shoreline path where the man fled vanished into fog. I couldn't see him. I couldn't know if he made it. That uncertainty sits in my chest now like a stone. My hand reached for the respirator strap, and my fingers found something that made my blood run cold. No strap. The mask had no cord tying it around my head. The plastic sat against my face because my hands held it there, not because it was secured. My earlier panic had assumed it worked. The system had let me believe that. The radio never had a cord either, not really, not in the way I needed. A laugh rose in my throat and died because laughter felt like surrender. The last thing I did with competence and spite was shove my phone into the emergency box and slam it shut, because physical containment mattered more than digital hope. If the man made it to the service road, he could find that box. He could find that phone. He could find the warning I'd tried to write. The fog around the dock shifted, and somewhere in it, a familiar symbol flashed briefly, stamped on metal, then vanished. The same circle with 3 short lines, shared across places, shared across cases. Later, days later, when my lease email sat unanswered and my number stopped working, a new binder arrived at a different station stamped with that same symbol. And the missing tab on it read Lantern Ops Revision 3B. One line had been added in fresh print, clean and confident. Host termination resolved.